Hi, David. It's Leonora here from UBC, and just a real fan of your thinking and your work. A comment and then a question for you, and I just want to pick up on your point about how we categorize ourselves. I think it's our inclination to, put subject boundaries around everything, and I think one of the huge opportunities in a morning and a day like today is to take down those boundaries. I often come to events like this and I think, if I could create a library from the people in this room and go out these doors, and I believe we really have an opportunity with the group that's gathered here today. I'm a little concerned probably about the lingering impression about university libraries, which I'll speak on behalf of if I can, that we're still, up on the hill in kind of providing mode. Just as we've, I think, got really past, clinging to our books, I think we are way past this notion of although I'm sure it feels like this very often, but I think we understand we need to move from collections to connections in your terminology and be much more outward looking. I want to emphasize that I think there is so much that we can work with and learn, especially from people in the public library sector. The 90 seconds or so that Ken gave last night on what it is to be a steward of public funds was worth all the books in our management library, I'm very sure. We know that as student wellness becomes an issue on many of our campuses, we have a lot to learn from the kinds of public library spaces and the popular collections that are actually stress reducers for our students. And certainly on this point of community stories, there's been a lot of successful things already happening in BC where we have reached out, many of our partners in the academic community working with all of you to gather their stories. And I would suggest that the next frontier for that is data, our data. There is so much open data. Everything that's commercial now is being analyzed somewhere. And just as we all, I think, are going to leave this evening and buy a lot of garlic and dark chocolate based on that bubble diagram that we saw last night, there's real potential for thinking about data in a much more coordinated way. Now, here's my question, which is a different one. You talked initially about internationalization, and it does strike me that if you look at the missions of not just universities, a place like UBC, a place like Syracuse, but our province and what it seeks to do, and many of our cities, we are looking to establish our global brands and identity. And I'd be really interested to hear you talk about that just a little in terms of how that is a community that we can interact with. So if I could get you to share a few thoughts on that.
Certainly, and I very much appreciate your comments about academic librarians. I hope I didn't come across stereotyping too badly because there's some amazing. By the way, did you see that? I think it was University of Albany just installed grass in their commons for finals week so that people can like hang out on the grassy yard for studying. I thought it was brilliant. Internationalization is an important topic. I mean, one is I've spent more time overseas. You learn. Once again, I learn about culture, and I learn about how important it is to see culture as a living thing, as a negotiated thing, as a constant community negotiation of what is important, how do we talk about it, what do we talk about, what don't we talk about. And so I was part of a group at the Salzburg Summit on libraries and museums in the age of participatory culture, and we developed a curriculum for library professionals and museum professionals, and one of them was about cultural skills. The ability to move between micro and macro cultures with some facility. Because what we often see, when we talk about, gee, the Italians are really all about archives, and the Swedes really have it right because they're about community and such. Well, we realize that there's a different culture between freshmen and sophomores and undergraduates and graduates and different faculties as well. And actually being attuned to understanding how we interpret, identify cultural skills, pay attention to, find out what's important, I think it needs to be part of, and frankly, I'll cop up for Syracuse, is not enough part of our curriculum right now where we're teaching librarians to read culture. I mean read it as a living, organic, there kind of thing. In the reference interview, Marie Radford talks about moving from the idea of a reference interview as sort of an interrogation of putting someone on the rack until they tell you what they're really looking for, to a reference encounter, which is a conversation. And part of it is learning power issues and learning language issues. And so I think that one of the things we want to do with Syracuse students is to expose them to more international culture, If we can't send them overseas, we can at least get them internships and virtual opportunities such as this, so they're working internationally. And I think that learning the sort of broad strokes of international culture will help them work with the micro strokes of when they get into a community to understand there's a west side, there's an east side, there's a humanities faculty, there's a physical faculty, there's differences here. But that's an important skill they need to know. So I don't know if I have the answer other than to say I certainly agree with you that it's essential.
Okay, anybody out there for now? Okay, well you can walk up while I'm talking. David, thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation and your book as well. One of the things that this has been talking a lot about what the libraries can do, but one of the things is a cultural change perhaps for librarians as well. I think of the libraries as more in that invisible work area where pride that nobody knows the work behind the scenes, and it's all done seamlessly and quietly and efficiently. So what I want to ask you is some tips on how to come out in front, to move out from the back room to the front room. Ken Roberts gave a great example yesterday showing the street view of the library, but I'd like to see if you can address the, how do you put the librarian in the street view?
Wow. Absolutely. Great question. And for me, the answer is not more. I have to say, the worst term that I think as librarians we've developed was bibliographic instruction, BI. That is BI. It just already sounds like something disgusting. And then you bring them over and we teach them how to be like us. For me, the number one way is to identify the projects that are being worked on by the community and join them. One of the examples, Jamie LaRue, who's the director of the Douglas County Public Library outside of Denver in Colorado, talked about how he was invited to be part of a panel from the local Chamber of Commerce. He couldn't do it, but he appointed a librarian to it. And she said, well, what am I going to do? He goes, you're going to go, you're going to be early, you're going to show up, and you're going to listen. And when they ask a question, you're going to help find an answer. And sure enough, over the months, what happened is if the librarian wasn't there, she wasn't there, they wouldn't start the meeting until she got there. What happened is making librarians visible by embedding them in the problems and projects and tasks of the community, not by broadcasting louder the things that we do. And often the things that we need to do, we need to spend a lot more time deciding, do we need to do them? The copy cataloging has come to a certain point where we really need to think about how fast we need to process physical items. How many cataloging terms do we really need to add to this record that's been pulled down? Reference, we've always thought of a librarian waiting behind a desk. What I think we need to think about is someone comes in with a question, we hand them a desk where they start bringing materials, and the reference librarian walks over and says, how can I help you now that you're in the middle of the process, not ask you to stop your process to come to me? So to me, the short answer is get embedded within the community, not broadcast out louder what you do to the community.